Okay. I got it. Mm-hmm. We can break in now. Okay. Yep. Yep. I'm here. Okay. It's not going to be Mark Kelly. Hello and welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across Atlanta. And those of you listening online, here we've got breaking news. Joe Biden has now decided to drop out of the presidential race. He has penned a letter. My fellow Americans, over the past 3.5 years, we have made great progress as a nation. Today, America has the strongest economy in the world. We've made historic investments in rebuilding our nation and lowering prescription drug costs for seniors and in expanding affordable health care to a record number of Americans. We've provided critically needed care to 1 million veterans exposed to toxic substances, passed the first gun safety law in 30 years, appointed the first African-American woman to the Supreme Court, and passed the most significant climate legislation in the history of the world. America has never been better positioned to lead than we are today. I know none of this could have been done without you, the American people. Together, we overcame a once-in-a-century pandemic and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. We've protected and preserved our democracy, and we've revitalized and strengthened our alliances around the world. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president, and while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision. For now, let me express my deepest gratitude to all those who have worked so hard to see me reelected. I want to thank Vice President Kamala Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all of this work, and let me express my heartfelt appreciation to the American people for the faith and trust you have placed in me. I believe today what I always have, that there is nothing America can't do when we do it together. We just have to remember we are the United States of America. Joe Biden put this on personal letterhead, not on presidential letterhead. Notice he put best interests of my party and the country for me to stand down, signaling in large part he has come to the resolution and belief that he cannot win. I have talked to pollsters who have been involved in providing the data for Joe Biden. On Monday of this past week, they started doing in-depth polling of the swing states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. They also did North Carolina. Joe Biden was significantly behind in all of those states. That was his own internal campaign data, which is much more in-depth than the public data that was provided to Joe Biden in the last couple of days in Delaware, and that has largely gotten him to make the decision that he needed to step aside. His son and wife were largely the last holdouts in the campaign, insisting that he could stay on, but Biden now deciding that he is going to step aside. One of the big issues, however, was what would happen, and he has decided to publicly endorse Kamala Harris. In fact, in a tweet, he says, "My fellow Democrats, I have decided not to accept the nomination and to focus all my energies on my duties as president for the remainder of my term. My very first decision as the party nominee in 2020 was to pick Kamala Harris as my vice president, and it's been the best decision I've made. Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this." Now, this goes to a Democratic Party leader I talked to last week and a couple of others who said Biden wanted a strategy from Democratic leaders before he got out on how to avoid an open convention. Here's why. The Democrats have gone through 4 open conventions in history, and they've lost the presidency after every contested convention where it was open. They don't want to lose this race. So they're going to go with Kamala Harris. The last polling for the Biden campaign was to test Kamala Harris's strength against Donald Trump versus Joe Biden's strength against Donald Trump. According to Axios, ABC, NBC, CBS, people I've talked to, he wanted to see if Kamala Harris would match up against Donald Trump. And in fact, in the internal campaign polling, Kamala Harris actually outperformed Joe Biden. The Trump campaign had wanted to keep Joe Biden in. And in fact, the Trump campaign had even said to The Atlantic last month in a profile with Tim Alberta that they were a little bit concerned they had overplayed their hand on Joe Biden's weaknesses and that he would drop out. And in fact, today, Joe Biden, president of the United States, signaling he will stay on in the presidency, but he will drop out of the race. J.D. Vance this morning on social media tweeted a question. If he's not competent to stand for re-election, how is he competent to stay president? If you've listened to CNN commentary in the past little while, Bakari Sellers, Democratic strategist, was on. Bakari turns the tables very quickly and says, Kamala Harris is going to be running against the oldest man ever to run for president of the United States. Can Donald Trump stay in for 4 years? I don't know that he can. This is an age election. Are you going to look backward or are you going to look forward? Kamala Harris can be forward looking. In fact, it is very notable politically. The candidates who do the best are the candidates who are forward looking, not backward looking. The Trump campaign already advised Donald Trump that you need to make a message for the future. You heard him start doing that on the stage. Well, maybe you didn't because the speech went on so long. He had an opportunity for a concise address on Thursday night, and it rambled on about an hour and a half, and I think a lot of people tuned out, but he began articulating his vision for the future. Democrats, you should know, are not sold on Kamala Harris, and in fact, I think it's very notable. Gavin Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer, this past week, the governors of California and Michigan came out and said they have no interest in being a vice presidential running mate for Kamala Harris. The behind-the-scenes rumblings on Kamala Harris, frankly, are not great among Democrats. Remember, she didn't have a strong race on the way to the White House in 2020. She never made it to Iowa. She had very stiff performances, and then once inside the White House, her polling went down. She's actually nationally less popular than Biden or Trump. However, she's got the chance to reboot herself. The question's going to be her team. So what does a situation like this work? Well, first of all, Kamala Harris is going to disappear for a few days probably. She's got to work the phones. Joe Biden endorsing Kamala Harris does not mean he can order his delegates to go with Kamala Harris. The delegates will have to vote. There will be a roll call vote of the delegates. It will be an online proposition that they will do before the Democratic convention. So here's everything Kamala Harris has to do in the next 2 weeks, really. She has to call the delegates. She has to call the donors. She has to call the party leaders. She needs the support of the Clintons. She needs the support of the Obamas. She needs the support of everybody possible in the Democratic Party leadership. She will have the support of Jim Clyburn, and he will be very, very persuasive with the Congressional Black Caucus and others. She will, in fact, have the support of the Congressional Black Caucus. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at the end of last week did an Instagram reel and live stream where she said essentially that the Democrats who wanted to stop Joe Biden also wanted to stop Kamala Harris. And the result was a view that progressives wanted to keep Joe Biden so that if he could drop out once the nomination was secure, he could then swap to Kamala Harris. Now, here legally is part of the problem. Joe Biden had 212 million reasons not to drop out. That's the money in his bank account for the campaign. Even though he's endorsed Kamala Harris can't get that money until she's the nominee. Though she's the only one who can get it. This is probably why she'll be the nominee, in addition to having Joe Biden support the Congressional Black Caucus, other Democrats not wanting to have a raucous convention in Chicago. Kamala Harris is the only candidate in the Democratic Party who can inherit the Biden campaign war chest because Kamala Harris was his running mate in the existing campaign. It's the Biden-Harris Campaign Committee Incorporated, not just the Biden Campaign Committee. So she can get the money. No other Democrat could get the money. What would happen is that money would have to go to the Democratic Party and could be used to coordinate with the candidate, but could not be used to fund the candidate. So if you have someone other than Kamala Harris, they start with $0 in the bank other than what they can bring. Donors, of course, would step up. But remember, in a presidential campaign, you're limited to just a few $1,000s in donations. You can write $1 million check to a super PAC, but you can only write, I think, $5,000 or so to a presidential campaign committee. So you'd have to have lots of $5,000 checks flow in very quickly for staff support and all those sorts of things. The other issue for Kamala Harris will have to be, assuming she's the nominee, who does she run with? I got thoughts. And also, who does she staff with? I have a hard time believing, just objectively, the Biden campaign team has not been quite competent this year. They're the ones who structured that debate. They're the ones who wanted the debate. They're the ones who put him on the debate stage. They're the ones who have made error after error after error after error after error. They have strategically poorly served Joe Biden. Why would Kamala Harris want that team? And then, of course, there is the issue, too, of the running mate. Now, there have been lots of names. Mark Kelly has been a name, the former astronaut, Gabby Giffords' husband, senator from Arizona. I don't know that Mark Kelly actually is as persuasive as a governor, in large part because governors run campaigns and can help win states. And there are two governors who come to mind. One, of course, is Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro is the governor of Pennsylvania, which has 19 electoral college votes. Josh Shapiro's introduction to the nation came after the attempted assassination of Donald Trump last weekend. And frankly, he handled himself and the situation very, very well. The result of which is he would probably be the front runner because he's Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania, 19 electoral college votes. Both campaigns, Biden and Trump, had previously determined that whichever campaign wins is probably the campaign that's going to win the presidency. All roads go through Pennsylvania. However, North Carolina has 16 electoral college votes. It's considered a swing state. It actually leans Republican slightly, but it's got 16 electoral college votes, and its Governor Roy Cooper is a term-limited Democrat who knows how to win over Republicans. He's done so twice, or actually more than that. And here's the key for Roy Cooper. Roy Cooper was an attorney general. He served as attorney general when Kamala Harris served as attorney general in California. They got to not just be friends, but Roy Cooper served as a mentor to Kamala Harris. In her own words, Roy Cooper served as a mentor to her, guiding her in how to move bureaucracy to affect what she wanted done when she was attorney general in California. So Roy Cooper would be right up there. Now, of course, yes, you do have in Arizona, Mark Kelly. It is a swing state. The polling in Arizona, however, suggests that it's not the best pickup for the Democrats. It might not move needles and could throw a wrench in Democratic plans in Arizona altogether. Pennsylvania, you've got Wisconsin, you've got Michigan. Those are the three upper Midwest states that both candidates are vying for. Pennsylvania has 19 electoral college votes, Michigan 15, Wisconsin 10. Arizona's only got 11 electoral college votes. So compare Arizona's 11 votes to North Carolina's 16, Pennsylvania's 19. The governors of Pennsylvania and North Carolina seem like they might be a better fit. The thing about Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania as well is you do have a Senate contest there. Dave McCormick is running as the Republican nominee. He's running behind the incumbent Democrat up there. However, the incumbent Democrat, Bob Casey Jr., has a family lineage there. His father was a very popular pro-life Democratic governor in Pennsylvania. He has stood solidly behind Joe Biden. That seat is a heavily contested seat. If you put Josh Shapiro in as the vice presidential nominee, not only do you use Josh Shapiro's turnout machine in Pennsylvania to help yourself, you probably do help Bob Casey as well. That might take Pennsylvania off the board for the Republicans for the presidency and also for the Senate. She's going to have to think strategically about this. She's also going to possibly want someone she can run with, but I've got to say this. That I just am not sure that Kamala Harris has what it takes to go the distance. We will find out. It's going to depend on her staff a lot. Kamala Harris's campaign staff in 2020, this isn't my opinion. This is the people who worked with Kamala Harris, the people who were in Democratic circles in 2020. They did a postmortem of her political campaign. And the thing that was recurring in the political campaign is that the staff that Kamala Harris surrounded herself with to build her candidacy for the presidency were far more focused on conversations on social media than they were on conversations among voters. The result is that the Kamala Harris campaign of 2020 wanted to win the daily Twitter fight. They didn't necessarily want to win the actual fight for the presidency. The result is that she got blown out of the water, was one of the first candidates to drop out in 2020 in the Democratic primary. She eviscerated Joe Biden on the campaign stage, but then she was also eviscerated by Tulsi Gabbard. So it's going to be interesting to see how she staffs up her campaign and also the fight that some Democrats have. I will tell you, James Carville has said several times now that the problem with Kamala Harris is the problem with Joe Biden. She was an enabler of the cover-up of Biden's condition. She was there the whole time. And the Democrats' own polling has shown behind the scenes that Kamala Harris doesn't do well. The reason she doesn't do well, in part, is because voters hold a grudge against politicians they believe lied to them. And it's very clear Democrats lied about Joe Biden's condition. They can try to turn the tables now on Donald Trump and say, well, he'll be the oldest candidate for president ever. Vice President Harris will be moving forward, not backward, things like that. But this is, if you go to whitehouse.gov, it's the Biden-Harris administration. Joe Biden is the first president to label his administration the tag team, Biden-Harris. It was the Bush administration, not Bush-Cheney. It was the Obama administration, not Obama-Biden. It was the Trump administration, not Trump-Pence, but it's been the Biden-Harris administration. She's tied to the record of Joe Biden. She was, of course, the border czar for Joe Biden. She was, of course, the person who decided that she would go connect with blue-collar voters, even though that was Joe Biden's shtick. She decided she would do it. She hasn't done well in those things. She's had enormous staff rollover. If you go back to her time as Attorney General in California and as her time in the Senate, she had higher turnover of staff than average for an Attorney General of a state or for a sitting United States senator. She's had much higher turnover in the vice presidency than other vice presidents have had in the past. That's going to be a warning sign for some staff. But at this point, the Democrats will get some renewed energy. This did not play to Donald Trump's hand. Donald Trump and the Republicans did an entire convention where Joe Biden was their theme. If Kamala Harris holds, they'll at least be able to tie it to the Biden-Harris administration. But Kamala Harris will be able to present herself one more time. The downside for Kamala Harris is she's tried 5 reboots in her presidency, in her vice presidency, and each of those 5 reboots failed. The result is, of course, a vice president whose popular polling is actually not fantastic. In fact, if you look at the Real Clear Politics polling averages right now for approval and disapproval, you've got not good numbers for Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, let's see, where is all the latest polling? Joe Biden's approval, he's down 17 points. Direction of the country, down 43 points. With Kamala Harris, you've got an approval rating of 30%. With Joe Biden, you have an approval rating of 37% in the polling average. So Kamala Harris's approval rating 30%, Joe Biden's 37%. She has a way to go. Donald Trump, by the way, is not liked. You should understand this moving forward. It's something the Democrats are hanging their hat on, that voters don't like Donald Trump. An overwhelming number of voters have never liked Donald Trump. If Kamala Harris can come out and present herself as likable, the Democrats think that gives her a leg up because of the likability factor. Republicans, of course, will have to go through Kamala Harris's record, and she does have a history that they will use against her. Kamala Harris is the more vetted alternative to Joe Biden than anyone else. You could have a Gavin Newsom, which wouldn't happen because Democrats actually think he's too partisan progressive. You could have a Gretchen Whitmer, who the Democrats like in Michigan, a blue state, Republican state that she flipped decisively to the Democrats. You could have any number of candidates, but it does make the most sense to go with Kamala Harris. The other issue you have to think about with Kamala Harris is that with Kamala Harris in that situation, she is going to be better defined by the Trump team than any of the other Democrats you could possibly get in. And the other thing you have to think about with Kamala Harris is she will only have California's electoral college votes tied to her, which were already going to go Democrat. So she does have to think about the swing state governors to be her nominee. Regardless of who her nominee is, however, she's going to be defined by her own record. And she will be defined by the Biden record, rightly or wrongly, if you're a Democrat, and they'll argue that she's distinct from Joe Biden, but they made the explicit choice to say this is the Biden-Harris administration. Things will change. This will move quickly. And the Democrats are all out there right now saying Donald Trump is now the oldest nominee in American political history. And we should all be wary of having someone as old as Donald Trump in there. The memo has clearly gone out that that's going to be the talking points for the Democrats. The one difference is that those same Democrats saying Donald Trump is going to be the oldest nominee ever participated in a cover-up of Joe Biden. There will be accountability there. There will have to be accountability on the Democratic side for that, and also with the press as we move forward. The question now is going to be, how does this play out? Does Kamala Harris get the nomination? If she's not a shoo-in for the nomination, You do have people like James Carville and others who have said she's a very weak nominee. We should give someone new. We should give a fresh face a chance. She's too tied to the Biden administration and the baggage of the Biden administration. He's made that case with donors. My suspicion is donors will be so relieved that Joe Biden is out that they will quietly embrace Kamala Harris. This reminds me of Mika Brzezinski the other day. Mika Brzezinski on Morning Joe actually went on an extended rant about the effort to toss Joe Biden. Mika Brzezinski warned the Democrats that should they go down that road, they may live to regret it. And the reason they may live to regret it is because with Joe Biden, you actually have a known candidate who does connect with people, or so she claims. And with these wild cards, you just never know what you might get. She went on to say that the Democrats probably should consider sticking with Biden because he was a known commodity and still close in the polls. Introducing anyone else at this late date could be a wild card scenario for the Democrats. She's not wrong, actually. She's not wrong. There was a path forward for Joe Biden, considering everything he's been through since the debate at the end of June. He was still within 2 to 3 points of of Donald Trump. So there you have it. This is your summation here. Kamala Harris endorsed by Joe Biden. Joe Biden sending a letter to the public that Joe Biden is stepping aside from the nomination for the Democratic Party. He will address the nation later this week. He will not step down from the presidency. You're listening to special ongoing coverage here. I'm Eric Erickson on WSB. Let's take a quick timeout. Thank you. I just saw his text message. Yes. Okay. Hey, and that's 95.5 WSBB FM Doraville, 95.5 WSB or 750 WSB, whatever. Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. Welcome. You're listening to 95.5 WSBB Doraville, 95.5 WSBB HD, and 750 AM WSB Atlanta across the Metroplex. The phone number here, if you want to be a part of this breaking news day, 404-872-0750. If you're just tuning in, if you've stepped out of church, your afternoon, you went to the all-you-can-eat buffet, you're coming out, well, have I got news for you. Joe Biden, President of the United States, has announced he will not seek re-election for the presidency after all. This has been building for some time, and there has been growing resentment in the ranks of the Bidens over the Obama camp's role in this. Now, if you're a regular listener to my show, I've been telling people this to immense blowback, I might add, by a lot of people who will get their news from social media that somehow there's this massive control. The Obama team has controlled Joe Biden in the White House, and it's not true. In fact, there's a great deal of resentment between the Biden team and the Obama team. Joe Biden and Barack Obama have had a very cordial, friendly relationship. However, Joe Biden, and particularly Joe Biden's wife and family, have always resented the fact that Barack Obama didn't stand behind Joe Biden in 2015. It is a well-known statement of fact in Democratic circles that this resentment has festered over time. Part of it, though, was, in fact, because of the death of Beau Biden. Barack Obama truly believed that Joe Biden wasn't in the best frame of mind to try to launch a presidential campaign after the death of his son. He clearly had made some level of dealing with the Clintons. She became Secretary of State, and he supported her run for the presidency in 2016. The Biden team has always believed, into the Biden family itself, that had Barack Obama thrown his weight behind Joe Biden would have run in 2016 and he would have stopped Donald Trump. But because he didn't run and Hillary Clinton did, she was unable to win the presidency, and that gave us Donald Trump. The Biden team has forever believed this about the Obama team. And as this situation has begun to fester among the ranks of the Democrats, campaign Biden has seen the hand of Barack Obama behind it all. You will recall one of the longest voices out there has been the voice of David Axelrod, saying, in fact, that Joe Biden needed to step out of the race. And when David Axelrod speaks, rightly or wrongly, it's viewed as the voice of Barack Obama because he was Barack Obama's chief strategist for so long. Then, of course, James Carville started talking the same way. James Carville, of course, is tied to the Clintons. So it came about that the Biden team looked at this as a coup from the Clintons and the Obamas, although the Clintons have in the last 2 weeks been letting it be known that they were standing behind Joe Biden, particularly in the last week. As the chorus of Democrats tied to Obama got louder and louder, the Clinton chorus got more and more defensive of Joe Biden. I have no idea what the strategic play is behind the scenes there. It's just a statement of fact. James Carville, however, has been out with donors telling them they need to completely shake up this race. Historically, however, you do have to remember the last contested Democratic convention got them Adlai Stevenson, who was destroyed in an election. Democrats don't do well with contested conventions. Complicating things now is that this convention is going to be in Chicago. The mayor in Chicago is a socialist who will side with the protesters, not the police. There could be real chaos. So as I told you guys last week from someone deeply within the Biden circle, that if Joe Biden, and he, by the way, the guy I talked to specifically said he didn't think Biden would be out before Monday, but that he would get out. And that he would, in fact, get out once the Democrats showed him a plan to avoid an open convention. They very much did not want an open convention. Mark Halperin circulated last week that that Biden would address the nation today, drop out, and that he wouldn't endorse Kamala Harris. He would support an open convention. Every Democrat I've talked to at the senior levels of the Democratic Party said that's absolutely not true because Joe Biden understands the history of Democratic open conventions. They always lose the election after they've had open conventions. They did not want an open convention. They wanted to minimize the chaos. So let me give you the lay of the land right here. Here's what's happening. I'll open the phones to you as well. 404-872-0750 if you want to be on the program. Here's the lay of the land. Joe Biden is still in Delaware. He will address the nation later this week. Benjamin Netanyahu will address Congress on Wednesday. Joe Biden, some speculated, would drop out, but not until after that because of his rivalry with Benjamin Netanyahu. Biden will probably address the nation on Thursday or Friday. And it'll be probably in the evening, so maybe it'll be on a Friday after the Carathon. That would be great, Joe Biden, if you didn't disrupt our Carathon for Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, but nonetheless, he'll address the nation later this week. Now, with all of this happening, Kamala Harris has to make a lot of phone calls. She's got to call the donors. She's got to call the Democratic Party leaders. She's got to secure a well of support from Democrats nationwide so that then she can go to the delegates, and the delegates themselves will have the opportunity to cast a vote for her in an online nominating process in the next 2 weeks, unless they put that off. See, here's the thing. The reason they were doing the online nominating process is because the state of Ohio essentially told the Democrats, if you don't have your nominee by August 7th, we're not putting you on the ballot. Ohio changed the rule. They told the Democrats, take your time. As long as it's done by Labor Day, you'll be good. But the Biden team has now for several weeks said we're still going to do this online thing because it's got to be August 7th because we don't trust the people in Ohio. They may drop that now and go to the convention. But wait a second. There's something else Kamala Harris is going to have to do. There's a convention coming up in a few weeks. The balloons, the staging that said Biden-Harris, all got to be changed. The campaign signs that said Biden-Harris, they've all got to be changed. She's going to need a running mate. This is an all-hands-on-deck moment for Kamala Harris, and who is going to advise her? Who will be her campaign staff? Who will be the people? Now, that's going to be the big tell here, too. Does she go with Biden team? Does she go with Obama team? Does she go with Clinton team? Is it that the Clintons have shown their support to the Biden-Harris ticket this week, hoping that maybe their people get on board the Harris team? I don't know, but clearly there's politics behind the scenes here. On top of all of that now, you also have the Secret Service director appears to be stepping aside after news broke that they lied last week. Last week they said that they had not diverted resources from the Trump team, and today the Washington Post and the New York Times are reporting that, in fact, they had done so. So she'll be stepping aside. So Biden comes into this. He's got this other mess. It's still kind of messy for the Democrats. They will sell this as we get to reboot, and Donald Trump is now the oldest candidate. I don't think that particularly is going to be a talking point that sells very well with the ongoing chaos. All right. 404-872-0750. That's the phone number. David in Tucker, you're going to be up first. Welcome. Uh, well, yeah, look, she has never been up to par as a candidate. And then listen, I'm trying to give you, as best I can, objective lay of the land here. I don't want to be a partisan pundit at this time. I got my strongly held opinions on this, but I'm just trying to play it straight with you and not just give you talk radio here, because this is big breaking news. I don't think it's a dispute that even Democrats acknowledge Kamala Harris hasn't done exceedingly well on the campaign trail thus far. She hasn't done well. The Biden administration, the Harris people have argued that the Biden team kind of suppressed her. They have resented the Biden team pushing her aside and not giving her the stage. Harris's supporters have said, this is in the New York Times, that her staff gets frustrated with her because she acts like she doesn't do the homework. that they prepare briefing books for her that she does not read. So when a president of the United States or a vice president of the United States goes anywhere, they have an advance team, and the advance team as we plot. What's the staging going to be? When are we going to get there? When are we going to leave? Who's going to come? Who's going to be on stage? What's the topic? All that. But a side of the advance team you never see is the research advance team. And the research advance team prepares a binder for each issue or where you're going for a location. And they give you the who's going to be there, who these people are, what the big issue is, what the facts are, what the talking points are, to anticipate questions, anticipate problems, all these things. And you're supposed to read it. If you go into a briefing with a world leader, if you go into a briefing, if you go to East Palestine, Ohio, wherever you go, you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to read the binder. And in the New York Times, people close to Kamala Harris complained that Kamala Harris did not do the research. She did not read the research. She didn't do the work. She would show up and think she could wing it, which you can't do as vice president of the United States. So here we are now where she's going to have to solidify support of Democrats in light of all these things and her repeated reboots in the press. And she's going to need to find her footing, and she's going to have to do it very quickly, because here's the problem. There are Democrats who do not believe Kamala Harris can win. And the result is they're going to be angling this week with donors to say we have to have an open convention. We have to have someone new. We can't go with her. She's going to have to quell those concerns. She's going to have to do a lot of outreach this week. She's going to have to be serious. And she's going to have to show that she can do it. If she can, she'll be fine. If she can't, this is going to go off the rails very fast. And I don't think the Democrats get two bites at the apple with the American public. I think if the Democrats go to Kamala Harris, she's not doing well, they say, well, gosh, we got to do someone else. At some point, it just becomes a doom cycle for the Democrats. They're trying to get themselves out of a doom cycle. Joe Biden has given them a lift to try. We'll see if he can actually pull them out of it. Jake, calling from Texas, no less. Welcome to the show. How are you? Mm-hmm. You know, Jake, go ahead. No. Go on. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I gotta say, and I appreciate the call, particularly from Texas, listening online. For those of you who might be listening to me online, if you couldn't hear what Jake was saying, he's concerned about the pro-life vote here. You know, pro-lifers actually left the Republican convention more disheartened than they had been because of what the Republicans did. And in fact, there is an effort underway among Democrats, despite their disdain for the pro-life side, to try to elevate those pro-life concerns to disaffect Republican voters who may be pro-life, to try to keep them home. One of the reasons is because in Florida and in the Dakotas, in several other states, there are going to be abortion measures on the ballot in November. Democrats believe those measures will drive Democrats to the polls in those states and make those states competitive for them. And if they can make pro-lifers be mad at the Republicans for not giving them specifically what they wanted, maybe they can stay home. There's a real political machination behind all of these sorts of things happening with a very fast-moving situation right now on the ground as everyone takes stock of it. My suspicion, however, is that the Republican Party is going to be deeply enthused, as will pro-lifers in November. Frank Luntz noted the problem for the Democrats is that we may be a bitterly divided nation, but that bullet going through Donald Trump's ear last Saturday turned every one of his supporters into a voter. Joe Biden stepping aside in favor of Kamala Harris does not bring a renewed enthusiasm to the Democratic side. It just brings a relief to the Democratic side. Relief is not necessarily enthusiasm. Phil in Kennesaw, you're going to be up next. Welcome. Great. How are you? It's all right. Yes, they did, but the Ohio Secretary of State was able to get that changed. Yeah, it would have. So here's the thing, Phil. The Ohio Secretary of State says you guys don't have to worry about this as long as it's done by Labor Day. You're fine. But for 3 weeks now, the Biden team has said we don't actually believe him. We're going to still do this virtual roll call vote. It's the governor of Ohio says, guys, don't worry about it. The Secretary of State said, guys, don't worry about it. The Republican leaders in the legislature said, guys, don't worry about it. But Joe Biden wanted to try to force this roll call vote to lock himself in. Now that that's changed, they may cancel this roll call vote. And I mean, they weren't telling the truth about Biden. So maybe now they'll say, oh, yeah, actually, you know what? Turns out they were right. And they'll start telling the truth about what happened in Ohio. The phone number here, 404-872-0750. A lot more to digest. Let's take a quick timeout. Yep. Uh, you can come back to me. I just needed a quick break. There we go. All right. Sorry about that, folks. I needed a quick break so that I could sneeze and cough. This is live radio, people, and there's no breaking. My mute button is broken on my microphone. Yeah, exactly. Totally. I was trying to hit my mute button to sneeze. I was like, I think I better go to a commercial timeout so I can sneeze and cough. And then the mute button worked again. So we're back. 404-872-0750 is the phone number. But wait a second. There's more happening on the ground here. You've got Jim Clyburn has released a statement saying it's got to be Kamala Harris. He's calling on the Democrats to stand behind Kamala Harris at this moment. Likewise, you've got who else out there? The Clinton campaign coming out and saying as well that they think it's got to be Kamala Harris. You've got Republicans already now dropping all sorts of opposition research on Kamala Harris and essentially saying this is a coup. In fact, they're circulating this tweet from Kamala Harris. Politicians shouldn't be able to pick their voters. Voters should choose their representatives. The Supreme Court's gerrymandering decision will have drastic consequences on the future of our nation. As president, banning partisan gerrymandering will be a top priority. Yes, but politicians shouldn't be able to pick their voters. Voters should choose their representatives. Republicans referring to this as a coup. They're not necessarily wrong. Now let's see. This is from Bob Costa. There's breaking news that they're covering as well, the same stuff we are. This is Bob Costa on CBS. There's a larger issue here. I'll just be frank with you. Gretchen Whitmer and Gavin Newsom have come out and say they're not going to challenge Kamala Harris. They've also in the past week come out and said if it is Kamala Harris, they're not interested in being her running mate. There is a cravenness that comes into politics. And the cravenness in that politics is that some Democrats aren't sure that Joe Biden or that Kamala Harris can go the distance. And because Kamala Harris can't go the distance, they don't want to be tied to Kamala Harris. I know that Democrats say Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, but it was progressive pundit Ezra Klein who pointed out behind the scenes, most of them don't actually believe it. They don't actually believe that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. It's something they say to inspire their voters to go vote. I think it would be a mistake for Kamala Harris to continue that theme when she has an opportunity to make it about the future. But a lot of these Democrats cravenly, they don't want to be anywhere near the Harris campaign because they don't actually believe that Harris can go the distance. She was a weak candidate in 2020, and they don't want to be there for the fallout. And they also think if Donald Trump gets elected, there will be massive blowback in 2026 in the midterms, and that will help them in 2028. If Kamala Harris actually gets elected in 2024, Democrats who say Donald Trump's a threat to democracy but don't believe it, she's going to be the incumbent in 2028. And the clock will be running out on Gretchen Whitmer. The clock will be running out on Gavin Newsom. They're term limited. And because they're term limited, they will be yesterday's news by the next campaign cycle after that, 2032. So they're betting Kamala Harris is a disaster and loses to Donald Trump so that they can be the savior of America, not just the party, in 2028. They're betting that Donald Trump wins and that there's a massive public blowback in 2026, and that in 2028, when Donald Trump is term limited and J.D. Vance is trying to continue on the legacy of Donald Trump, they'll be able to package themselves in some way. And the only way they can do that is if Kamala Harris loses. You have deeply ambitious politicians on the Democratic Party side. Gavin Newsom covets the presidency. Everyone knows he covets the presidency. Gretchen Whitmer has been buzzed about greatly. Andy Beshear of Kentucky. He's from a political dynasty in Kentucky. He would love to make it to the next level. Then there's Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, who my guess is would not accept the vice presidency. Maybe he will. Roy Cooper makes more sense because he's term limited. He's out. He's done. He and Kamala Harris are friends. They would make a ticket. He would bring some old school Democratic wisdom that can play in the South to pick up white suburban voters. You've got to understand that many of the Democrats don't actually believe Donald Trump's a threat to democracy, even as they say it. And they know he's term limited and in 4 years would be done. But Kamala Harris would be 8 years beyond the 4 years of Joe Biden. And a person like Gavin Newsom would be yesterday's news by then. A person like Gretchen Whitmer would be yesterday's news by then. Only someone like Josh Shapiro would still be relevant because he would be just be coming off of a second term as governor if he wasn't a vice presidential nominee. It's something for these Democratic politicians to have to strategize and think about. Again, remember, they all say Donald Trump's a threat to democracy. Most of them don't really believe it. So there is this thinking behind the scenes. Might as well let Kamala Harris have it. She's not a great nominee. She could probably lose. The Democratic pundits on television won't tell you this. They will rah-rah her and say how great she is and that she's a strong and formidable candidate. The record says otherwise. The record is this: 5 profiles of the New York Times in 4 years talking about Kamala Harris's effort to reboot herself and her image. You don't need to be rebooted that many times if you are a good candidate. That's just the reality here. And these are craven Democratic politicians who know it and don't look at the veneer headed into a Democratic convention and see anything other than this is a veneer of support because they know the history, they know the turmoil, and they know the record, and they covet the presidency. And if Kamala Harris gets elected, it more and more begins to preclude them from possibly being a Democratic nominee in the future, given that she would have 8 years there and they would all be out of office for probably 4 or more years, and not be in the conversation. Don't forget that perspective here. Let's see here. I want to jump to another phone call real quick. Raymond from my in law's town, Carrollton, Georgia. Welcome. How are you? Great. I think that would have made more sense. And there are a lot of Democrats who suggested that because this is going to give the Republicans a talking point. If he's not fit to run for president, how is he fit to be president? And a lot of Democrats are going to have to answer that question. If you don't think he's fit, and that's why they're turning the tables. And clearly a memo's going on. I've seen tons of Democratic operatives say Donald Trump is now the oldest man to ever run for president. We're not sure he can make it 4 years. Clearly a talking point. Clearly a talking point. Now, Mitch McConnell has released a statement. For 4 years, the American people have faced historic inflation at home, chaos at the border, and weak leadership on the world stage. Our nation is less prosperous and less secure than it was in January 2021. We cannot afford 4 more years of failure. Unfortunately, the Democratic Party has been busy in recent weeks trying to upend the expressed will of the American people in primary elections across the country. Washington Democrats have not proven themselves any more capable than the president of delivering the secure borders, safe streets, and stable prices that working families deserve. They are selling open borders, higher prices, climate radicalism, and soft on crime policies, and the American people are not buying it. That from Mitch McConnell. I'm Eric Erickson here on the Cox Media Group family of stations. We're going to take a quick time out here at the bottom of the hour for some news. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here on WSB Radio. It is 3:35 p.m. Eastern Time. The President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden Jr., in a statement to the nation, printed, says, "My fellow Americans, over the past 3.5 years, we have made great progress as a nation." Going on to recount those things, he says, "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president. And while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interests of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." My friend Martha Zoller pointed out, it was interesting to her, said in the best interest of my party and the country as opposed to the country and party. Interesting word choice there. Yes. Why? Because as the party nominee, it didn't look like he would win. His internal polling he had commissioned himself last week showed he did not win, was not going to win. On top of that, Donald Trump has released a statement on social media essentially saying crooked Joe Biden was not fit to run for president and is certainly not fit to serve and never was. All those around him, including his doctor and the media, knew that he wasn't capable of being president, and he wasn't. We will suffer greatly because of his presidency, but we will remedy the damage he has done very quickly. Make America great again. Additionally, he also, or the chairman of the Georgia Republican Party, Josh McConnell, has released a statement saying if Biden's not fit to run, he's not fit to serve, he needs to resign. Mitch McConnell, in a statement, the Senate Republican leader said, quote, "For 4 years, the American people have faced historic inflation at home, chaos at the border, and weak leadership on the world stage. Our nation is less prosperous and less secure than it was in January 2021. We cannot afford 4 more years of failure. Unfortunately, the Democratic Party has been busy in recent weeks trying to upend the expressed will of the American people in the primary elections across the country. Washington Democrats have not proven themselves any more capable than the president of delivering the secure borders, safe streets, and stable prices that working families deserve. They are selling open borders, higher prices, climate radicalism, and soft on crime policies. The American people are not buying it." I want to play this audio for you. This is Mika Brzezinski. She was on Morning Joe the other day.
Started pushing back, and I think part of that is giving him the space to make this decision, to finish making this decision with his family this weekend.
He's also a man of faith and a man of tremendous historic accomplishment. And look, it's impossible to ignore where this is going and exactly what started it. I'm not unaware of that. At the same time, I still believe that you don't know what you have until it's gone, and that there will be that feeling at some point.
You think there'll be, if he leaves the race, you think Democrats will regret it?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Because among many reasons, which I've already stated and I won't state again, don't worry, but none of these notions are backed by a strong alternative, an alternative that has beat Trump before, an alternative that is vetted, an alternative that is tested. And so that's a lot to throw away.
A lot to throw away. She says there's an opposition research file on Kamala Harris, and the Democrats are rallying around her very quickly. They really don't have a choice to do so, but she isn't the strongest possible candidate, and it does make you wonder if there will be panic in a few weeks if her polling does not significantly turn itself around as Republicans work very hard to define her. You have to remember a couple of dynamics here that the Democrats need to adjust to. Because Kamala Harris is not the Democratic Party nominee, she can't get access to a massive war chest of money yet. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has now officially become the Republican nominee, and the Republicans have been outspending or outraising the Democrats significantly. The Republicans have an opportunity to rapidly define Kamala Harris for the public in a way she can't define herself. And whoever defines the person first tends to win. If Republicans can get out quickly and define Kamala Harris and have a message about Kamala Harris that the public finds unflattering, the Republicans have a significant chance to upend this process and sour the Democrats' love affair with Kamala Harris that's happening right now. But additionally, if they do it now, they potentially sow seeds of chaos into an open convention, which no one really wants. In fact, Joe Biden himself made it very clear to Democratic Party leaders he would not leave the race if it meant an open convention because of the chaos. Every time the Democrats have had an open convention, they've lost the general election. They did not want to go through that. So you define Kamala Harris right now headed into a convention. You give her some opportunity to kind of define herself at that convention, but you can poison the water very, very quickly. If you do so, it becomes just a mess for the Democrats, who at this point don't have the money that Donald Trump does. They really thought Donald Trump would not have the money, but ever since Alvin Bragg was able to get that conviction in New York, Donald Trump's been raising money hand over fist. You know what's so interesting as well as I'm looking at this breaking news. So I will tell you guys just in my lay of the land, I've got company coming over tonight and I'm making pizzas. So I was at home separating the big bulk rise of pizza dough into 8 balls so that they can rise and come to room temperature. When I got the call to come be on radio, Wolf Blitzer 2 hours ago on social media took a picture of himself having a wolf spritzer, and essentially a margarita at a Mexican restaurant, El Presidente, where he was enjoying a margarita 2 hours ago, and now he is on television. I'm watching him live interviewing Eric Swalwell, who did the Bang Bang with Fang Fang, and he is endorsing Eric Swalwell as Kamala Harris on national television and calling for Democrats to rapidly rally around her. Just very interesting. Also on Wikipedia, they now have a picture of the 2024 presidential election, and it has Donald Trump and TBD, to be decided. We're assuming it'll be Kamala Harris. The phone number here, 404-872-0750. If you want to be on the program, let's go to Jared calling from South Carolina. Welcome. Good. How are you? Yeah. So no, look, there's so much ill will. There's no way the Democrats go towards Robert Kennedy Jr. None. Robert Kennedy Jr., by the way, burned his bridges with the Trump campaign too by releasing private audio of his conversation with Donald Trump. That's not going to happen. The Democrats don't want Robert Kennedy Jr. He has burned his bridges with them. And there is no way they would make him the Democratic Party nominee. They also think he's a completely marginalized candidate and is having trouble with ballot access in some states. Michael calling from Conyers, you're up next. Welcome. How are you? Great. What's going on? No. So the vice president never becomes, or I'm sorry, the Speaker of the House never becomes vice president. The Speaker only becomes president if something happens to the president and vice president. So if Joe Biden steps aside, which he doesn't plan on doing, but if he did, Kamala Harris elevated to the presidency, she would be able to pick her vice presidential candidate who would be voted on, approved by Congress to be her vice president. Be a very tricky proposition getting Republicans to go on board with something like that. But the speaker won't become president unless Kamala Harris becomes president and then something happens to her and there is no vice president. Yep. Keep on asking questions. Yeah. Okay. So for those who don't understand, 3% of independent undecided voters, about 25% of the country is going to vote Democrat, 25% is going to vote Republican. Then you've got single issue voters in there. Once you weed out the single issue voters, you narrow it down to about 5% of the overall electorate is actually meaningful. Majority of that is 3%. That 3% plays out to be somewhere around maybe 70,000 voters spread across swing states. We don't know how Harris will play there. However, there is some data. We know that she actually has poor favorability with black men. It's very interesting. Democrats were surprised in their focus grouping that the segment of the population most vehemently opposed to Harris as the nominee was black women, not because they didn't like her, but because they thought that other people would not like her. And there is something to that. Black men in particular have no love for Kamala Harris, given her history as Attorney General in California. It's really too soon to say. She has an opportunity to reintroduce herself and define herself. But it is going to be those 70,000 independent voters, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, who are going to matter greatly. They went for Barack Obama twice. Will they go for Kamala Harris as the first black presidential candidate, black female presidential candidate? I'm not sure they will. Time will tell. All right. Any other questions? Okay, yeah, absolutely, Michael. Sure. Okay, just a spot analysis here of does this open new states up? I don't think it opens any new states up for the Democrats, put it to you that way. So the swing states right now, Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. North Carolina and Georgia at this point are considered Republican-leaning states. I don't think Georgia opens up, despite the percentage of population that is black voting age population in Georgia. I don't think you see a real shift to the Democrats in Georgia because of the white suburban vote. I don't know that that would go to Kamala Harris. It might open up New Hampshire, given the demographics of there and the percentage of voters in New Hampshire who are men. New Hampshire is one of the few states where the male population tends to vote at parity or above the female population. That might change things there. I don't think it will actually hurt the Democrats in Minnesota. There are some call from Democratic activists to make the governor of Minnesota Kamala Harris's running mate, to lock in a state that has been suggested in the polls it's considering Donald Trump. I don't think it would. I do think, depending on Vice President Harris's running mate situation, that there could be a change there. So, for example, you've got Pennsylvania. If Josh Shapiro becomes the nominee, that could open it up for them. North Carolina could be opened up by Roy Cooper. There's been some suggestion that she could put the governor of Illinois on the ticket. I don't think that gives her anything other than money. He's very, very wealthy, and that might be what she needs. I think it's a tough call there. I heard Bakari Sellers on CNN mentioning Mark Kelly of Arizona. That's kind of, let's run through the list. Let's get Mark Kelly. I don't think Mark Kelly is as compelling a candidate, certainly with his wife, Gabby Giffords, who was nearly assassinated. That gives them something. But Donald Trump was just nearly assassinated. We're really going to have a conversation about gun control at the top of the tickets after Donald Trump, too, was nearly assassinated. I don't think that Mark Kelly is an answer for the Democrats there, and could also throw the Democrats for a loop in Arizona when it comes to the Senate. Shapiro, to me, makes the most sense. In the same way, frankly, I think it was a missed opportunity on Trump's part to make J.D. Vance the running mate, because J.D. Vance doesn't actually expand an electoral map. Vice presidential candidates tend not to matter, but when your candidates are as old as Biden and Trump are, they do tend to matter. And a Marco Rubio in Florida would have caused constitutional issues, but could have gotten Hispanic voters. A Tim Scott in South Carolina, black male voters. Pennsylvania, for the Democrats, if Josh Shapiro were the vice presidential nominee, brings a ready campaign apparatus in ways that other candidates have not had, brings a ground game to be able to persuade the candidates or to persuade voters, brings a hefty amount of money that can also help Bob Casey. Bob Casey is the embattled Democratic senator who's polling ahead of Dave McCormick, the Republican nominee, but is well below 50%. That tends to be a warning sign for an incumbent. So Shapiro makes the most sense. The question is, does Shapiro want it? He may not want it. Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, is a Jewish governor that could help the Democrats at a time some Jewish voters are a little bit apprehensive of the anti-Semitism in the country that seems to be on the left. That could also cause discord, frankly, among the progressive Antifa activists who show up in Chicago for the Democratic convention. And that could cause chaos that hurts the Democrats. Gretchen Whitmer, I think, is a non-starter, having two women running. I don't know that the Democrats want to do that. Maybe they do. I know white progressives love the idea of a Pete Buttigieg, but I don't know what Pete Buttigieg gives you. It's not like he's going to persuade independent or black male voters to come to you. It's Pete Buttigieg is things white progressives like. A Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg ticket. And by the way, Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg hate each other's guts. So I don't know that that's going to happen. It's not a coincidence that every time there's an attack on Pete Buttigieg in the press, it follows an attack on Kamala Harris. The Pete Buttigieg campaign or team, they've long been believed by the Harris people to plant the negative stories about Kamala Harris. So Harris in turn plants the negative stories about Pete Buttigieg. There's no love lost there. That would be a disastrous campaign ticket. So maybe it'll happen, given the way Democrats have been going. 404-872-0750. That is the number. Charlie in Woodstock, you're up next. Welcome. What's going on? Okay, Charlie, thanks very much for that. So how can Kamala Harris be a viable candidate given everything that has happened, her disastrous foray into presidential politics and the like? She's the best they can do. If Joe Biden was going to lose, you got to go with Kamala Harris because she's a black woman. And the Congressional Black Caucus insists on it. She's a woman that will in some way give her a leg up. And she's going to have to do what she can do. Is she the best candidate for the Democrats? No. And privately, Democrats concede she's not the best candidate. She has a track record, and that track record is of a candidate who underperformed in 2020. It was a very favorable or unfavorable view in the New York Times in the 2020 election. She did not perform very well, and her staff was fairly ruthless about Kamala Harris in 2020. Now, this is the latest big profile of Kamala Harris in the New York Times. In search of Kamala Harris, after 3 years, the vice president is still struggling to make the case for herself and feels she shouldn't have to. In fact, I can tell you what's going to happen right now. This is so obvious to me. We are about to hear more screams about racism and sexism than we've had in really any time in American political history. Astrid Herndon is the writer who wrote the profile of Kamala Harris in October of 2023. The subtitle is, after nearly 3 years, the vice president is still struggling to make the case for herself and feels she shouldn't have to. She and her team immediately went to sexism and racism. Biden and Harris should theoretically be entering the 2024 contest riding high. Democrats staved off a red wave in the 2020 midterms and continue to perform well in special elections on ballot referendums, driven by a backlash to the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Instead, poll after poll shows Biden, who will be 81 in November, locked in a close race with his most likely opponent, Donald Trump, and hounded by voter concerns about his advanced age and his ability to complete a second four-year term. But if Biden's age is the Democrats' explicit electoral challenge, Harris, 59 this month, is the unspoken one. 3 years after she and Biden were presented as a package deal, a 2-for-1 special that included a younger non-white candidate to counterbalance Biden's shortcomings, Democrats have not embraced the president in waiting. In interviews with more than 75 people in the vice president's orbit, there is little agreement about Harris at all, except an acknowledgement that she has a public perception problem, a self-fulfilling spiral of bad press and bad polls, compounded by the realities of racism and sexism. This year, an NBC News poll found that 49% of voters had an unfavorable view of Harris, with the lowest net negative rating for a vice president since polling began in 1989. Keep in mind, this was written in October of 2023. Republican presidential candidates like former Ambassador Nikki Haley have already argued that a vote for Biden next November is a vote for Harris. Trump recently gave an interview to the former Fox host Tucker Carlson in which he mocked Harris's speaking style and said aloud that many people seem to be whispering that the closer Harris gets to the presidency, the further she has become from convincing the country that she is presidential. This is not a president of the United States' future, Trump said in a preview of Republican attacks against her, and I think they probably have some kind of primary and other people will get involved. Trump isn't the only one floating a Harris replacement scenario. In September of 2023, New York Magazine published the case for Biden to drop Kamala Harris, and a Washington Post column argued Biden could encourage a more open vice presidential selection process that could produce a stronger running mate. In the same week, 2 Democratic House members, Jamie Raskin of Maryland and Nancy Pelosi of California. Though the two are not particularly close, she and Harris, evaded saying on CNN whether they thought Harris remained the strongest running mate for Biden in 2024. And Elizabeth Warren said, I really want to defer to what makes Biden comfortable on his team. That was just October of 2023. There isn't a lot of love for Kamala Harris among the Democrats. My buddy Thomas just texted me. We are now officially burdened by what has been. It's an ongoing statement that Kamala Harris makes repeatedly. We are unburdened by what has been, or burdened by unburdening ourselves. She speaks like this, newspeak. She's going to have to change that on the campaign trail. It's not hard. It's not easy to jump into a campaign like this. It is not easy to jump into a campaign, build up a team. Who is she going to rely on? Does she go back to her old team? Does she rely on the Biden team? Chris Coons is on CNN right now, the senator from Connecticut, who's a Biden campaign co-chair, sticking solidly behind Kamala Harris, calling on Democrats to rally around Kamala Harris, all those sorts of things. They're going to have to get a campaign team up and running. They're going to have to design the logo. They're going to have to do all of these things, and they're going to have to make Kamala Harris the forefront and get out of the shadow of Joe Biden. It's just a difficult thing. Take your politics out of this for a moment. Just please take your politics out of this for a moment. At this point, I got to emphasize this point to you. Take your politics out of it. Take your love of Kamala Harris out of it. Take your hatred of Kamala Harris out of it. Take your love or hatred of Donald Trump or Joe Biden out of it. It is July 21st, 2024. Early voting starts in just over 2 months in this campaign cycle. Kamala Harris has to fund the race, find the people, find a message, find a campaign logo, do advertising. She has so much she has to do. She's got a convention coming up in less than a month. It will be her convention. They now have to message a convention. They have to make a theme for a convention. They have 4 days they have to fill for a convention. This is not an easy task for anyone. And she also is the incumbent vice president of the United States who has duties. And so behind the scenes, she's going to have to pick and staff a campaign and gear things up and fire things up and run a campaign in addition to serving her day job as vice president of the United States. I don't care whether you like Kamala Harris or not. It's going to be very difficult for her to be able to do this. And there will be lots of missteps on the way against a fully operational, fully funded, fully staffed campaign by Donald Trump. It is going to be no easy task for the Democrats. I do suspect, though, that many members of the media and Democrats who covered for Joe Biden's decline will do everything possible to cover for Kamala Harris. The problem now is that so many people realize they were played that there's going to be even more skepticism of Harris moving forward. It's Eric Erickson here on WSB. We'll take a quick timeout for the headlines and news. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here on WSB. The phone number, if you want to be a part of this, is 404-872-0750. The Make America Great Again coalition, the Super PAC, they've already got out an ad attacking Kamala Harris, raising eyebrows among Democrats about how quickly the Republicans were able to turn this around. This is what they have out.
Kamala was in on it. She covered up Joe's obvious mental decline.
Our president is in good shape, in good health, tireless, vibrant, and I have no doubt about the strength of the work that we have done.
But Kamala knew Joe couldn't do the job, so she did it. Look what she got done. A border invasion, runaway inflation, the American dream dead. They created this mess. Kamala owns this failed record. Make America Great Again Inc. is responsible for the content of this advertising.
There you go. Republicans already out with an attack on Kamala Harris. The attack ads by the Republicans do right themselves in this, frankly. And we're going to see more of this. Remember, she is the person who Joe Biden designated as the borders are. The number one issue in public opinion polling right now is the border. And what Republicans will now do is a pretty obvious attack. If this is the Biden-Harris administration, then Kamala Harris needs to ask, should Alejandro Mayorkas stay on? If this is the Biden-Harris administration, Republicans will ask, should the border policies of Joe Biden be changed? If this is the Biden-Harris administration, Republicans will ask about the Secret Service. Yesterday, the Secret Service and the Department of Homeland Security released a statement denouncing the sexism of people casting aspersions on the female Secret Service agents who were protecting Donald Trump. They released that before people within the Secret Service confirmed their initial statements denying the Trump reports of denied aid were wrong, and in fact, they had denied aid. Kamala Harris, by this being the Biden-Harris administration, is going to have to answer for the Biden administration at a time the Biden administration is not popular, and she will be tied to Joe Biden as that ad did. Her team now has to scramble to come up with a new message. She does not have the time to do the detailed messaging that she needs, and what she's going to have to do to a degree is go back to what she did in 2020 and resurface those themes. The problem is those themes couldn't get her to Iowa in the Democratic primary. And again, as I said, she's going to have to decide, does she rev up her own team? Does she get the Biden team that wasn't exactly competent? Does she get the Obama team? Does she get the Clinton team? Who does she get? These are not easy things for anyone, particularly Kamala Harris, who's tied to an administration that itself isn't popular, and herself, who is not popular. It's not going to work. And you got Democrats themselves who aren't confident in Kamala Harris's abilities to run a campaign. It's very notable, as the news reports are saying, that Barack Obama has released a statement in support of Joe Biden, but Barack Obama has not called for Democrats to coalesce around Kamala Harris. All right, we got a lot of people who have questions. I'm happy to answer them for you. Robert in Athens, you're going to be up next. Welcome. Great. How are you? Look, I have little birdies who send me these things. And in fact, I'm texting to see if I can get one of the Trump people on with me. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to pull that off in the next hour while I'm here, but I got to tell you, they are fast and furious in their communications right now. The Trump team is out very aggressively pushing the anti-Harris message, tying her to Joe Biden and to the cover-up of Biden's health. And I suspect that's what we're going to hear for the next couple of weeks. All right, Lee, you're in Taylorsville. You're going to be up next. Welcome. All right. Wait, okay. You lost me on that. So will the president have to be nominated? What hang on. Say that again. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, okay, that's a great question. So, what will happen is the Monday night of the Democratic convention, they will vote for Kamala Harris. That'll be the first order of business. Is the delegates will cast their votes for her or someone else. She'll still speak that Thursday night. What will happen then is that after the votes come in to be the nominee, probably then will she do like Trump did and announce her vice presidential pick. That vice presidential pick will then be confirmed by acclamation and speak on Wednesday night. Now, what she may do is she may come forward before the convention and launch her vice presidential nominee. She has that right to do it. It's what historically has been done until Trump this year. Typically, even Trump did it in 2016 with Pence. It's a couple of weeks before the convention announced this is what the ticket is going to look like. She's going to have to make a lot of phone calls. And a lot of phone calls to make sure that she can get this done. I'm not 100% sure that's going to be the case, that she'll be able to make that happen, but we will see. What a wild ride it's going to be for her and the rest of the nation. All right, Matthew and McDonough, you're up next. Welcome.